Fire, it brings warmth, heat, and light. It can be a comfort in the cold, a flicker in the dark, a promise that you're not alone. But fire can also take so much. It can consume. It can whisper your name and never give it back. This is a story about a boy who survived a fire, but didn't escape the house. Not really. Because some houses don't burn. Some houses remember. And some shadows whisper long after the flames go out. So if you hear your name in the walls, if the mirror forgets your reflection, if the marigold ribbon tightens on your wrist, don't run. Remember. Submitted for your approval by the Archive Society, I call this story The Tale of the Whispering Shadows. Mark was 4 years old when the McAllister house caught fire. He remembered the heat first. It came in waves, curling through the hallway like a living thing, licking the wallpaper, turning the air into smoke. The walls groaned. The ceiling popped. The shadows on the floor didn't flee, they danced. He was in the upstairs closet, knees tucked to his chest, clutching his brother Jamie's toy train. The closet smelled like cedar and dust. He'd hidden there before during thunderstorms, loud arguments, games of hide and seek. But this time, the door wouldn't open. The knob was hot. The air was thick. He could barely breathe. Outside, his mother's voice rang out, sharp and panicked. "Mark! Where are you?" He tried to answer, but his voice was swallowed by the smoke. He coughed, eyes stinging, lungs burning. Somewhere down the hall, Jamie was crying. Then the crying stopped. The closet door rattled. He heard footsteps. Then silence. Then arms. The door burst open. Smoke poured in like a wave. A figure stood there, backlit by flame. A firefighter. Masked. Towering. The oxygen mask hissed with every breath. His jacket was heavy canvas, rough and soaked with heat. It smelled like ash and sweat and something chemical. Strong arms lifted Mark. The jacket scratched his cheek. The firefighter's gloves were thick, but the way he held Mark was careful, like he was something breakable. "I've got you," the man said. Not loud. Not panicked. Just steady. Mark clung to the toy train. He couldn't see the man's face behind the mask, but he heard the voice. Felt the calm in it. Trusted it. They moved fast down the stairs, past the marigold ribbon his mother had tied to the banister, through the front door that was already half collapsed. The house roared behind them. Outside, the air was cold. Mark gasped. Someone wrapped a blanket around him. Someone else tried to take the train from his hand. He wouldn't let go. His mother didn't come out. His father didn't come out. Jamie didn't come out. Mark didn't cry. He just stared, the toy train still clutched in his hand, the marigold ribbon trailing from his wrist like a goodbye. The fire burned until morning. The house didn't collapse completely. It stayed standing, blackened, broken, but upright. Like it was waiting. He woke up in a hospital bed. The lights were too bright. The sheets were stiff. His throat hurt. There was a bandage on his arm and a plastic bracelet around his wrist that said McAllister, Mark, age 4. He blinked. The room was empty. Then he heard voices outside the door. "He hasn't said a word," someone said. A woman. Kind voice. "But he's stable. No burns. Just smoke inhalation." Another voice answered. A man. Familiar. Steady. "I was the one who pulled him out," the man said. "He was in the closet. Holding a toy train. Wouldn't let go." Mark's breath caught. "I don't know if I'm allowed to ask," the man continued, "but if no one comes forward, I'd like to be considered." There was a pause. "You're asking to adopt him?" the woman asked gently. "I'm asking to give him a home," the man said. "Me and my partner, we've been waiting." And he looked at me like he already knew. Mark closed his eyes. He didn't know the man's name. Not yet. But he knew the voice. "I've got you." 10.5 years later, Mark woke to the smell of cinnamon toast and the sound of Jordan humming off-key in the kitchen. It was in Mark's best interest to be placed with this couple rather than being in the system. Jordan and Steve were Mark's father's best friends, who moved just a couple of streets over. They lived in the same town and went to the same church. They treated Mark like a son. But no one could replace the family he had lost. The light through the curtains was soft and golden, the kind that made everything look gentler than it really was. He blinked at the ceiling, heart still thudding from dreams he couldn't name. Smoke. Shadows. A train clutched in his hand. A voice calling his name. He sat up slowly. His room was familiar: posters on the wall, a stack of graphic novels on the desk, the marigold ribbon tied around the lamp. He'd kept it for years. No one remembered where it came from. But he did. Mark's legs felt heavy. His throat was dry. He reached for the water bottle on his nightstand and took a sip, then ran a hand through his hair. The dream had been vivid. Too vivid. He could still feel the heat on his skin, the weight of the firefighter's jacket, the hiss of the oxygen mask. He could still hear the voice. "I've got you." Downstairs, Theo was already dressed, sleeves rolled up, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. His forearms were marked with old scars, faint, pale lines that caught the light when he moved. Mark had seen them 100 times. He had never asked. Jordan flipped toast onto a plate. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said. Mark grunted. "What time is it?" "Almost 10, Theo said." "You were out cold." Mark rubbed his eyes. "Had weird dreams." Theo's eyes flicked toward him, just for a second. "About the house?" Mark nodded. Jordan set the plate in front of him. "You know we don't have to talk about it." "I know," Mark said. "But it's still there. The McAllister house. It didn't burn down." Theo's jaw tightened. "Some things don't." Mark looked at him. Something about the way Theo said it, quiet, final, like he knew more than he was saying. He didn't ask. Not yet. But the dream lingered. The texture of the firefighter's jacket, rough canvas, soaked with heat. The way it scratched his cheek when he was lifted. The gloves, thick and clumsy, but careful. The oxygen mask, hissing with every breath. The voice, steady and calm. "I've got you." Mark stared at Theo's hands. The way he held his mug. The way he moved. The way he stood like someone who'd carried weight through fire and didn't flinch. He remembered waking up in the hospital. The lights too bright. The sheets too stiff. The voices outside the door. "I was the one who pulled him out," Theo had said. He was in the closet. Holding a toy train. Wouldn't let go. Mark hadn't understood then. He was 4. He was grieving. He was floating. But now, at 15, he was starting to see the shape of it. Theo wasn't just his dad. He was the one who carried him out. It was the night before Halloween. Mark sat in the backyard with his friends Lila, Jason, and Emily huddled around the fire pit that Theo had built from old bricks and river stones. Mark never told his friends about the house fire. Lila had long red hair, Jason was short and muscular, perfect for being on the school's wrestling team, and Emily was the nerd of the group, always getting A's in almost everything except physical education. The flames crackled and spat sparks into the cold October air. The sky above was sharp with stars. Jason carried his feelings for Mark like a quiet flame, never quite spoken aloud but always flickering in the space between them. Sometimes, when the moment felt tender enough, he'd brush against the edge of confession and say, "You didn't survive that fire by chance. I think God kept you here, so you could find your way to me." The woods behind the fence loomed like a wall of breathless trees. Jordan had gone inside to refill cider and hot chocolate mugs. Theo was still out front, talking with neighbors about the new roof. The housewarming party had thinned to a few lingering adults and a playlist of soft jazz from a portable speaker that no one was really listening to. Mark poked at the fire with a stick. The marigold ribbon on his wrist caught the light, flickering gold and orange like it belonged to the flames. Jason passed around cans of root beer. "So," he said, "who's got a real ghost story?" Emily groaned. "Not this again." Lila grinned. "Come on, it's tradition." Jason leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Okay. What about the McAllister house?" Mark didn't flinch. He just kept poking the fire. "You ever wonder why it's still standing?" Jason asked. "Like, it burned down, right?" But it didn't. It's just sitting there. Empty. Watching. Emily shivered. "It's cursed." Lila rolled her eyes. "It's condemned." "That's not the same thing." Jason smirked. "Bet none of you would last an hour in there." Mark spoke without looking up. "Bet you wouldn't either." Jason raised an eyebrow. "You've been there?" Mark nodded once. "I lived there," said Mark, "a long time ago." Silence. Emily's can of soda hissed as she opened it too fast. Lila's grin faded. I don't remember much, Mark said. Just that it burned. And somehow, I got out. Jason whistled low. That's messed up. Mark shrugged. It's just a house. But the way he said it made the fire crackle louder. Lila leaned in. What if we went? Just for an hour. Midnight to 1. Like a dare. Emily shook her head. No way. That place gives me hives. Jason grinned. Come on. Flashlights, snacks, backup batteries. We'll be fine. Mark looked up. No phones. No lights. Just guts. Emily groaned. You're all insane. Lila raised her can. Midnight. 1 hour. We go in, we stay, we come out. Deal? Jason clinked his can against hers. Deal. Emily sighed. Fine. But if I die, I'm haunting all of you. Mark didn't raise his can. He just stared into the fire. The flames shifted. For a moment, he thought he saw something move in the woods, a flicker of light, a shadow too tall. He blinked. It was gone. Behind them, the porch light flicked on. Theo stepped out, arms crossed. Mark. Mark turned. Yeah? Theo's voice was calm, but firm. Don't. Jordan followed, holding a tray of mugs. He set it on the table. You're not going near that house. Jason sat up straighter. We were just talking. Theo's eyes didn't leave Mark. That house remembers you. It might want to keep you. The fire popped. No one spoke. Mark stood slowly. I'm not scared of it. Jordan's voice was quieter. That's not the point. Mark looked down at the ribbon on his wrist. The knot was tight. The ends were frayed. It had been his mother's. He didn't remember tying it. He just knew it had always been there. Mark stood slowly. I'm going. I mean, it's not trespassing if I own it. Theo didn't argue. He just nodded once, like he'd known this was coming. Jordan set his own mug down. Then take this. He handed Mark a small flashlight. Old. Heavy. Reliable. Mark took it. The dare had been made. And the house was listening. Theo stepped forward, voice low but steady. Fine, Mark. But I'm coming with you all. Jason blinked. Wait, seriously? Emily looked like she might cry. You're not scared? Theo's gaze didn't waver. I've walked through worse. Mark stared at him. The firelight caught the edge of an old scar on Theo's wrist. The same wrist that had once lifted him from the smoke. He didn't say anything. But the marigold ribbon on his arm felt heavier. Like it knew. They didn't sneak out. They prepared. At 11:45 p.m., Mark zipped his black hoodie, tied the marigold ribbon tighter around his wrist, and met Theo by the front door. Jason, Lila, and Emily waited on the porch, flashlights in hand, their breath fogging in the cold. Theo wore his old fire department jacket. The canvas was faded, the patches worn. Mark recognized it instantly, the same texture that had scratched his cheek the night he was carried out of the burning house. The same jacket that had held him like a promise. Jordan stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" Theo nodded. "I won't let anything happen." Jordan looked at Mark. "You remember the rules?" Mark nodded. 1 hour. No phones. No running. Jordan handed him a small pouch. Inside were 4 folded marigold ribbons and a silver whistle. "If anything feels wrong, blow it. If anything feels familiar, tie it." Mark didn't ask what that meant. He just took it. They walked together, 5 figures moving through the quiet streets, flashlights off, the moon guiding their way. The town was asleep. The trees leaned in. The air felt thinner the closer they got. The McAllister house stood at the edge of Forest Hollow, crooked and waiting. Its windows were dark. The porch sagged. The marigold ribbon Mark's mother had tied to the gate was still there, faded, frayed, but intact. Theo stepped forward first. He didn't knock. He placed one hand on the gatepost, closed his eyes, and whispered something Mark couldn't hear. Then he opened the gate. They stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned under their weight. Emily clutched Jason's arm. Lila's flashlight flickered. Mark stared at the front door. It opened on its own. Inside, the entryway stretched impossibly wide. Hallways branched off like veins. The ceiling loomed high above them, and the staircase curled upward like a spine. Theo's voice was steady. "Stay close. Don't touch anything unless you have to." Jason tried to joke. "What if it touches us first?" Theo didn't smile. "Then we remember who we are." Mark stepped inside. The air was thick, like breathing through cotton. The walls pulsed faintly, like they were listening. The mirror in the hallway was cracked. Jason and Lila's reflections moved with them. Emily's flashlight glared off the surface. Mark's reflection was missing. He didn't say anything. They moved deeper into the house. The floorboards creaked. The wallpaper peeled in long strips. The scent of burnt wood lingered, sweet and sour, like marigolds left too long in the sun. Mark stopped at the base of the stairs. He remembered this. The way the shadows had danced. The way the fire had whispered. The way the house had breathed. Theo stepped beside him. "You okay?" Mark nodded. "I think it remembers me." Theo's voice was quiet. "So do I." Mark looked up at him. "You were the one who carried me out." Theo didn't deny it. "I didn't know," Mark said. "You weren't supposed to," Theo replied. "Not until you were ready." Mark reached into the pouch and pulled out a ribbon. He tied it to the banister. The knot was tight. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. Like it had been emptied out and left behind, but something still breathed inside the walls. Mark stepped into the hallway. Theo walked beside him, flashlight steady, eyes scanning the corners. Jason, Lila, and Emily followed close behind, their footsteps muffled by the thick, warped carpet. The air was heavy with dust and something else, something sweet and rotting, like old flowers left too long in a vase. "This place is huge," Jason whispered. "It didn't look this big from outside." "It wasn't," Mark said, almost to himself. They passed a mirror. It was cracked, the glass fogged with age. Jason and Lila's reflections moved with them. Emily's flashlight glared off the surface. Mark's reflection was missing. He stopped. Blinked. Looked again. Nothing. Then the air shifted. It wasn't colder, it was still. Like the house had stopped breathing. At the base of the staircase, a boy appeared. He didn't walk in. He was just there. Barefoot. Pale. Wearing clothes that looked like they belonged in an old photograph, suspenders, a buttoned shirt, one sock missing. His hair was neatly combed, but his eyes were wide and glassy, like he hadn't blinked in 100 years. "Want to play?" he asked. Emily gasped. Jason stepped back. Lila held her flashlight steady. Mark didn't move. Theo stepped forward, voice low. "Who are you?" The boy tilted his head. "Henry," he said. "I used to live here. Before the fire." Mark's breath caught. Henry smiled, but it was wrong, too still, too practiced. "I remember you. You were small. You cried a lot." Mark's flashlight flickered. "I waited," Henry said. "I waited for someone to remember me. Now you're here. We can play forever. You, Jason, and me." The shadows behind him stretched like arms. Jason grabbed Mark's sleeve. We should go," he said, panic setting in. But Mark was already stepping forward. Henry turned and walked up the stairs without a sound. Mark followed. Theo hesitated, then moved after him. "Stay close," he told the others. "Don't speak unless you have to." The staircase creaked. The wallpaper peeled in long strips. The scent of burnt wood grew stronger. At the top of the stairs, Henry stopped in front of a door carved with a spiral sigil. It pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. "This was my room," Henry said. "It still is." Mark stared at the sigil. It looked familiar. Like something he'd seen in a dream. Henry turned. "You left me. You forgot." But the house didn't. Theo stepped between them. He didn't forget. He survived. Henry's smile faded. Surviving isn't the same. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was untouched. A rocking horse sat in the corner. A toy train rested on the windowsill. A marigold ribbon lay folded on the bed. The air was still. Too still. Mark stepped inside. The sigil door slammed shut behind them. Mark spun around, heart pounding. The room was too quiet. The air too still. The walls pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. Henry stood in the center of the room, barefoot on the warped floorboards. The marigold ribbon lay folded on the bed. The toy train rested on the windowsill, exactly where Mark had left it the night of the fire. "You remember," Henry said softly. Mark nodded. "I remember the fire. I remember hiding." Henry stepped closer. "You remember me?" Mark hesitated. "I don't know." Henry's smile was thin. "You do. You just forgot." But the house didn't. The shadows in the corners thickened. The mirror on the wall showed Henry's reflection, but not Mark's. "You left me," Henry said. "You got out." "I didn't." Mark backed away. "I didn't know. I was 4. Henry's voice sharpened. "You were supposed to stay. We were supposed to play forever. I'll keep you two here as my family. Time to die." The walls whispered. The floor groaned. The toy train began to move on its own, rolling slowly across the windowsill. Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out the pouch Jordan had given him. He untied one of the marigold ribbons and held it up. Henry flinched. "You don't belong here," Mark said. "You're stuck." Henry's eyes darkened. "So are you." The shadow surged forward, wrapping around Mark's legs, pulling him toward the bed. The air grew thick. The room tilted. The sigil on the door pulsed faster. Mark gasped. "Theo!" No answer. Henry raised a hand. "Stay. Stay and forget. Stay and play." All around the mulberry bush Mark clutched the ribbon. "I remember my mom's. I remember my brother. I remember who I am." The ribbon glowed faintly. The shadows recoiled. Henry screamed, not loud, but sharp, like glass breaking inside a memory. The door burst open. Theo stood there, flashlight blazing, eyes locked on Henry. "Let him go." Henry's voice cracked. "You took him." "I saved him," Theo said. "And I'll do it again." Mark dove forward, clutching the ribbon. The shadow snapped at his heels, but he made it through. Behind him, the room collapsed inward like it had never existed. Henry's voice echoed once more. "You'll come back." The sigil room collapsed behind them. Not with fire. Not with sound. With silence. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes your heartbeat feel too loud. The kind that comes after something ancient exhales for the last time. Mark stumbled into the hallway, Theo catching him by the shoulders. The marigold ribbon in Mark's hand was glowing faintly, the knot still tight. Jason, Lila, and Emily stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Their flashlights flickered. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. The floor beneath their feet groaned, not like wood, but like something deeper. Something waking up. "We have to go," Theo said. Mark nodded, breath ragged. "It's unraveling." Behind them, the hallway stretched longer than it had before. Doors blinked in and out of existence. The mirror on the wall shattered without sound, shards hovering midair before dissolving into dust. Emily whimpered. "This isn't real." "It is," Lila whispered. "But it doesn't want us to leave." Jason grabbed her hand. "Then we run." They moved as one, Theo leading, Mark beside him, the others close behind. The staircase twisted beneath their feet, steps shifting like teeth. The banister pulsed under their hands. Mark reached into the pouch and pulled out another ribbon. He tied it to the newel post at the bottom of the stairs. The house shuddered. The front door was gone. In its place, a hallway that hadn't been there before. Long, narrow. Lit by a single swinging bulb. Theo didn't hesitate. "This way." They ran. The hallway stretched. The bulb flickered. The walls whispered. "Stay. Stay. Stay." Mark's legs burned. His lungs ached. But he kept running. At the end of the hall, a door appeared. Not the front door. A side door. Half-rotted. Familiar. Theo kicked it open. Cold air rushed in. They spilled out into the yard, gasping, coughing, blinking against the sudden moonlight. The McAllister house stood behind them, silent and still. Then it began to fold. Not burn. Not collapse. Fold. Like a paper house being turned inside out. The windows blinked shut. The porch curled inward. The roof folded like wings. And then it was gone. Just a patch of scorched earth. A marigold ribbon fluttering in the wind. Mark fell to his knees. Theo knelt beside him. "You okay?" Mark nodded slowly. "I remembered." Theo placed a hand on his shoulder. So did it. Jason sat down hard on the grass. What the heck just happened? Emily was crying. Lila held her. Mark looked at the empty space where the house had been. "It tried to keep me," he said. "But I tied it down." Theo smiled faintly. "You did more than that." Mark opened the pouch. One ribbon left. He tied it to the fence post. The knot was tight. The wind stilled. And the house did not return. The house was gone. The others had gone home, Jason still shaking, Emily wrapped in Lila's coat, Lila walking backward down the street like she didn't trust the house to stay gone. Jordan had met them at the edge of the woods, flashlight in one hand, thermos in the other, eyes wide with worry but voice calm. Now it was just Mark and Theo, sitting on the back steps of their house, wrapped in blankets, steam rising from mugs of tea they weren't drinking. The marigold ribbon was still tied to Mark's wrist. The last one from the pouch. Theo broke the silence first. "You saw him." Mark nodded. Henry. Theo looked out at the trees. He was already gone when we got there. The fire had moved too fast. Mark's voice was quiet, but the house kept him. Theo nodded. Some places do that. They hold on. Mark looked down at his hands. You were the one who carried me out. Theo didn't answer right away. Then, yes. Mark's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Theo's voice was steady. Because you were 4. Because you were grieving. Because I didn't want to be the reason you remembered the worst night of your life. Mark blinked hard. But I remembered anyway. I know, Theo said. I just hoped, if you remembered, it would be on your terms. Mark looked at him. You told the caseworker you wanted to adopt me. Theo smiled faintly. I told her I wanted to give you a home. Jordan and we'd been waiting. And then there you were. Wrapped in a blanket. Clutching a toy train like it was the only thing left in the world. Mark's voice cracked. It was. Theo reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small, soot-stained toy train. The paint was chipped. The wheels still turned. I kept it, he said. You dropped it when they put you in the ambulance. I picked it up and never let go. Mark took it with shaking hands. I thought I lost it. You didn't, Theo said. You just gave it to someone who could hold it for a while. Mark stared at the train. Then at Theo. I remember the way you said it, he whispered. I've got you. Theo nodded. And I always will. Mark didn't cry. Not exactly. But something inside him softened. Unlocked. He tied the last marigold ribbon to the porch railing. The knot was tight. 3 days later, Mark returned to the lot. He didn't tell Theo. Didn't bring Jason or Lila or Emily. He walked alone, just after sunset, the sky bruised with violet and gold, the wind sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. The McAllister house was gone. The lot was bare, scorched earth, cracked foundation, a few broken bricks scattered like bones. But the air still felt thick. Still felt watched. Mark stepped carefully, each footfall deliberate. He carried the toy train in one hand, the pouch of ribbons in the other. The last one, the one he'd tied to the porch, had come loose in the wind. He'd found it in the backyard, curled like a leaf. He stood in the center of the lot. Closed his eyes. Listened. The house didn't speak. But the ground did. A low hum. A memory. He knelt and placed the toy train on the cracked foundation. Not as an offering. As a marker. This is where I left, he said aloud. And this is where I return. He tied the ribbon to a bent nail sticking out of the concrete. The knot was tight. The wind stilled. And then movement. Not from the ground. From the air. A shimmer. A flicker. A boy-shaped shadow standing just beyond the edge of the lot. Henry. He looked smaller now. Dimmer. Like memory fading. Mark didn't flinch. Henry didn't speak. Mark stepped forward. You're not forgotten. Henry blinked. Then why did you leave? Mark's voice was steady. Because I had to live. Henry looked down. I didn't. Mark nodded. But you're still here. Henry's eyes filled with something ancient. Not anger. Not grief. Just waiting. Mark reached into the pouch and pulled out the silver whistle. He didn't blow it. He placed it on the ground beside the train. For you, he said. In case you ever want to leave. Henry didn't move. Mark turned and walked away. He didn't look back. The wind picked up. The marigold ribbon fluttered. The toy train gleamed faintly in the dusk. And the house did not return. But the memory stayed. The end. I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society adjourned.